This is the Global News Podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Alex Ritson, and in the early hours of Sunday, the 11th of April, these are our main stories. Prince Charles pays tribute to his father as mourning continues for the Duke of Edinburgh. Thousands of people flee their homes after a volcano erupts on the Caribbean island of St Vincent. And a UN official warns that Myanmar could be headed for civil war after its military coup. Also in this podcast, Cambodia threatens violators of its coronavirus lockdown rules with jail and vaccine avoiders with the sack. And the South Pacific tribe for whom Prince Philip was a god. Mourning continues for the Duke of Edinburgh, husband to Britain's Queen Elizabeth, who died on Friday at the age of 99. In his first public appearance since his father's death, Prince Charles remembered the Duke as a father, a husband and a public servant. The Prince of Wales delivered his statement from his country home, Highgrove, in the west of England.
I particularly wanted to say that my father, I suppose the last 70 years, has given the most remarkable, devoted service to the Queen, to my family, and to the country, and also to the whole of the Commonwealth. And as you can imagine, my family and I miss my father enormously. He was a much-loved and appreciated figure. And apart from anything else, I can imagine, and we're so deeply touched by the number of other people here and elsewhere around the world in the Commonwealth who also, I think, share our loss and our sorrow. And my dear papa was a very special person who, I think above all else, would have been amazed by the reaction and the touching things that have been said about him. And from that point of view, we are, my family, deeply grateful for all that. It will sustain us in this particular loss and at this particularly sad time.
Our royal correspondent Johnny Diamond gave me his assessment of Prince Charles's remarks.
It's that curious thing that is the royal family, that mix of personal, very personal really, from Prince Charles there. Obviously he has just lost his father, and the public, because the royal family is a public institution here in the United Kingdom. And it's that curious mix that makes the royal family so special, and that I think also makes these times so curious, and makes the fact that Prince Charles makes a public statement effectively just over a day after the passing of his father so special. It must be very difficult for him, but he feels the need to speak publicly. The same sort of statements came almost 20 years ago now when the Queen Mother, his grandmother, died. And it is, again, that emphasis on the private on the one side, his own personal pain, but emphasising the service which the Duke gave, and also speaking of how the emotion which has, I think, has come from many quarters here in the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth and around the world, how that has helped the royal family at this time. It's a curious thing, a royal death, because it is both private and public, and that's reflected in this statement.
But a very different funeral from that of the Queen Mother, and we're getting some details now.
Yes, it will be a very different funeral, and I think there are two reasons for that. The primary reason is the Duke's own desire for a much more low-key funeral. He was a man who didn't enjoy ceremony, who didn't like it. He made that pretty clear during his life. He had a strong hand in designing what will be the day of his funeral, and that is very much reflected in the fact that it's all going to be at Windsor, at the castle there, the royal residence there. It will be self-contained. It will not have any public element. However, the second thing that has driven that is the coronavirus pandemic and the rules that now mean that public gatherings can't go ahead, that there'll only be 30 people in the chapel itself rather than perhaps the 800 that might have been there, and that there will be social distancing throughout.
Little doubt what will get the tabloids talking, though. Harry will be there, but no Meghan.
No, Meghan, because she is pregnant and her doctors advise against travel at this time. I don't think it's a huge surprise that, given her condition, she won't be there. But I think there'll be a sigh of relief from many quarters in the royal family that at least Prince Harry will be there.
Johnny Diamond, and we'll have more on the life and legacy of Prince Philip later in the podcast. In the last edition of the Global News podcast, we reported that the Caribbean island of St Vincent has been rocked by the eruption of a volcano that had been dormant for decades. La Soufriere had been quiet since 1970 until Friday, when explosive plumes of ash and smoke spewed from the mountain. So far, no injuries have been reported, but thousands of residents have been forced to evacuate their homes for nearby emergency shelters and cruise ships. Ralph Gonsalves is the Prime Minister of St Vincent. The BBC's Paul Henley asked him how many people have been affected.
Immediately, probably 10,000 persons, and the adjoining areas, another 7,000.
How are you getting people out?
On the northeastern side, we've gotten people by road, and on the northwestern side, we've gotten them both by road and by sea.
And what is the immediate threat to life? Is it ash? Is it flying or flowing lava? What's happening?
Ash. We don't have the lava. What is happening is that a lot of the fresh magma, which has, through the tremors, which have come to the surface, they have to get out. And now there's a vent and it's just exploding the gases and the ash.
But I understand that the situation of getting people onto other islands and onto cruise ships to safety is complicated by whether or not they've been vaccinated against COVID.
That's an issue. Obviously, we can't really send persons to the other nearby territories unless they have their vaccine.
And what stage is the vaccination program at there?
We have done about 12% of the population thus far.
So what happens to those who haven't been able to be vaccinated and who need a new home quickly?
Well, we have the shelters, and the shelters are makeshift facilities in schools and churches and the like.
Are people being refused access to other islands if they're not vaccinated or not?
No, the point is that people are safe and they're being properly cared for in the emergency shelters. What has happened is that there's been an outpouring of really love across the region and here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, because individuals are offering homes. Ordinary people, I mean, it's really touching. We are a Caribbean family.
Are you hopeful that people will be able to return to their own homes soon?
Well, the scientists indicated to us that this may take a few weeks or a few months, maybe up to 3 months. But we will be able to rebuild. We are very optimistic. We are not a people of lamentations, and certainly I'm not. And we will develop back those areas where we have any problems.
Ralph Gonsalves, the Prime Minister of St Vincent, speaking to Paul Henley. To Myanmar now, where fresh reports are emerging of a brutal crackdown on street protests, this time in the city of Bago, northeast of Yangon. The latest violence takes the total number of people killed since the army seized power